Getting back into my reading here. Genesis chapter 14. Lot captured in battles of the kings. He is rescued by Abram. Melchizedek administers bread and wine and blesses Abram. Abram pays tithes. He declines to accept spoils of conquest. Now, this is one might have to do in two sections because there's a lot of Joseph Smith translations. But here we go. Verse 1. And it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that these made war with Bera, king of Sodom, and Bersha, king of Gomorrah, and Shinab, king of Admah, and Shemeber, king of Zeboam, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these were joined together in the vale of Siddim, which is the Salt Sea. 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and in the 13th year they rebelled. And in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and smote the Rephaims in Ashtaroth, Karnaim, and the Zuzims in Ham, and the Emims in Shava Kiriathim, and the Horites in their Mount Seir, unto El Paran, which is by the wilderness. And they returned and came to En Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and smote all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites that dwelt in Hazazon Tamar. And there went out the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboam, and the king of Bela, the same as Zoar. And they joined battle with them in the vale of Siddim. Okay, so what's going on here? We've got 5 kings against 4 kings. Amraphel, Arioch, Elasar, and Tidal. Now, Tidal's just king of nations, which implies that he had several nations that were under his dominion, that they were kind of vassal states to him. But Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, seems to be the leader of this group, because the 5 served Chedorlaomer for 12 years. They rebelled in the 13th year, kind of broke away, gained their independence, and then in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer joined with his 3 allies, and they all came in and started wiping out the nations. Now, a number of these peoples that are mentioned here, the Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Rephaim, the Zuzim, and the Emims. I'm pretty sure all of those are races of giants. These were not normal, these were not 6-foot tall men, these were 8-foot tall men. But they came in and they laid waste to all these areas. And I butchered some of those names. I'm usually pretty good, but some of those names just, yeah. Now they say the Vale of Siddim, and that is the Salt Sea. And that could be, that's most likely the Dead Sea, what we call the Dead Sea. Could be the Red Sea, but it is most likely the Dead Sea because that's where the plain of Jordan is. The plain of Jordan is on the north end of the Dead Sea. And we know from the previous chapter that Lot pitched his tent toward Sodom in the plain of Jordan. And later these cities will be, they were the cities of the plain. So, yeah. But that's what's going on. We have these 5 kings. Their cities are Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboam, and Zoar. And they all rebel against Chedorlaomer, who was the king of Elam. At this time, Elam was in a very powerful nation. And if you remember, Elam was one of the sons of Shem. So these are Semitic peoples fighting against the cities of the plains. The cities of the plains, we don't know what their ancestry is directly, but they were not in the land of Canaan. They were the cities of the plains in Jordan. Remember, Abraham took the land of Canaan, and Lot went into the plain of Jordan. There were two separate lands. So there's a good chance that these cities were also Semitic in origin and in ancestry. So let us continue our story of war here. These 5 kings are going to war with the 4 kings in the vale at the Dead Sea. So we get verse 9. With Kedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and with Tidal, king of nations, and Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings with 5. And the vale of Siddim was full of slime pits. And the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and fell there, and they that remained fled to the mountain. And they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their victuals, and went their way. And they took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Okay, a couple of other quick notes here. Of course, Lot was captured because he was a resident in Sodom, and the 5 kings were defeated by the 4. But I do want to point out this, I believe, if I remember correctly, Amraphel, according to the book of Jasher. Again, this is an apocryphal source. But according to the book of Jasher, Amraphel, king of Shinar, is another name of Nimrod, who was the mighty hunter that most likely was the king at the time of the Tower of Babel. And it's very possible that he would still be alive at this time. Shem was still alive at this time. And Nimrod was Ham's son, so he's only 1 generation after Shem. So it's not impossible that Amraphel was Nimrod, that these were the same people. I just think that's an interesting note. Okay, verse 13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew, for he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, and brother of Aner, and these were confederate with Abraham. So here we have Abraham's allies are some of the Amorites. But a couple of notes here first. He's Abram the Hebrew. Remember, in the modern day, Hebrew generally refers to the Jews, only the Jews. But Abram was a Hebrew. He is known as a Hebrew because the word Hebrew, I may have mentioned this in the previous video, the word Hebrew simply means a descendant from Eber. So anybody descended from Eber at this time would have been known as a Hebrew. Also, the plain of Mamre, in the footnotes, it says, by the terebinth of Mamre. Now, the terebinth of Mamre is a reference, this I found fascinating when I looked into it, that there is an ancient tree, similar to an oak tree, in the Middle East, and it is considered to be the site where Abraham dwelt. This is when he says he dwelt at the plain of Mamre. It could be translated as terebinth, which is a type of tree. So Abraham pitched his tents under the canopy of this large tree, and it is considered a holy site because it is also thought to be the place where, as we will find later, Abraham entertained holy men. And there's still a tree there, apparently. There's still this ancient tree. I don't know how old the current tree is. Whether it's 3,000 years old or not is somewhat debatable, but I find it interesting that there is a tree there that still holds this tradition with it. So here we go, verse 14. And when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his trained servants born in his own house, 318, and pursued them unto Dan. And he divided himself against them, he and his servants by night, and smote them, and pursued them unto Hobah, which is on the left hand of Damascus. And he brought back all the goods, and also brought again his brother Lot, and his goods, and the women also, and the people. So Abram hears that Lot was captured, and says his trained servants, 300, born in his own house. Now these weren't his own kids, but they were the children of his servants. They were the children of his house, because I've told you, Abraham was not just him and his immediate family. He was a large, wealthy man. It was a large household, wealthy man, many servants, many people who belonged to his tribe. And within this, he was able to train and arm 300 soldiers. And it says they were trained servants. These were trained soldiers. These weren't just servants that he handed pitchforks to. These were men who were trained in combat. He had on call an army of 300 that he could take into battle whenever he needed to. Abraham had a huge following of people. He was the ruler of a household of hundreds, probably over 1,000. But he goes and he rescues Lot. I will also say that talks about pursued them unto Dan and on the left hand of Damascus. I don't think that these names, now these lands may have had these names at the time, but I think this is a later edit from later on, where the compiler or translator or transcriber, whatever, he is making a new copy of Genesis, and he is inserting the names, the current names. So it's like, today, if I talked about the Dutch settlers in the United States, I would talk about them settling in New York. However, at the time, they called it New Amsterdam. But if I told somebody that they settled in New Amsterdam today, most people would not understand what I was saying. They wouldn't know where that was. So I call it New York. And I think it's the same thing here. We use the names Dan and Damascus because when it was being written or translated or whatnot for the time period that it was written in, that they modified some of the names so that it was more familiar to the audience, the people they were writing to. Anyways, verse 17. And the king of Sodom went out to meet him after his return from the slaughter of Kedorlaomer, and of the kings that were with him at the valley of Sheba, which is the king's dale. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought forth bread and wine, as he was the priest of the Most High God. And there's a Joseph Smith translation here. He brought forth bread and wine, and he brake bread and blessed it, and he blessed the wine, being the priest of the Most High God. So kind of the first record of the sacrament ordinance being administered. Now, there is no other record of it. They do mention breaking bread in other places, but this is the only reference that seems to indicate that there was actually a sacrament ordinance being performed. I'm not sure if it was the same ordinance or if this was just kind of a breaking of bread kind of thing, which was a common tradition. So exactly what that means, I am not sure, but it is interesting that it is there. Verse 19. And he blessed him and said, Blessed be Abram of the Most High God, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the Most High God, which hath delivered thine enemies into thy hand. And he gave him tithes of all. And the king of Sodom said unto Abram, Give me the persons, and take the goods to thyself. And Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread, even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldest say, I have made Abram rich, save only that which the young men have eaten, and the portion of men which went with me. Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, let them take their portion. Now there is a rather long Joseph Smith addition at the end of this chapter. It's not a correction of anything, but it is an addition to the end of the chapter, which I will do in a second video. But there's just a couple of things. So Abraham, when he went and he rescued Lot, he also rescued a lot of other people. It says he brought back the goods and the women and the people. So there were a lot of captives. The other kings had taken many people captive. And when they get back, he does pay tithing, which is an interesting note. He gives 10% tithing to Melchizedek, because Melchizedek was the high priest of God at the time. So he is the one that we know the higher priesthood is named after, the priesthood of Melchizedek. But then the king of Sodom says, well, you return all the people, but you can keep all the spoils. And Abraham says, no, I'm giving everything back, because I I don't want you to be able to say that you are the one that did this for me. God gets the credit, and you get to keep what is yours. I don't want any of it. But he does say, see, he took his own 300 men, but he did also take his confederates or his allies with him, the three Anar, Eshcol, and Mamre. These are the three Canaanite allies that he had, and they sent their own soldiers. And so Abraham said, no, I'm not taking anything. I paid my tithing, and I rescued my nephew. I'm good. But my allies do get their portion. They get their right of a portion of the spoils. Everything else goes back to you. And I love that. He didn't want anything for himself, but he didn't forget that his allies had rights too. Even though he gave everything back to God, in a sense, his allies had the right to claim their portion. And I think that is a very, it's very telling of Abraham's character, that he knew not only what he needed to do, but he needed to respect the rights of others. But this video is getting too long, so we're going to end it here. And as I said, I will do the Joseph Smith translation in a follow-up.